Hello, everybody. Welcome into our Northside Hospital postgame show. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's Jeff Sintel. We're down here on the field, the same field that we have been on before, talking about the same thing we've talked about a year ago. I honestly don't even know what to say. We will talk about everything that goes down between Georgia and Alabama, the controversial fourth down decision that Kirby Smart makes that certainly leads to the conclusion of the game. You can debate amongst yourself if that cost Georgia the game. Actually, coming up in a couple of minutes, we'll actually get to hear Justin Fields' perspective on that, why he thought Georgia chose to run that at the time, what he thought the coaching staff had seen during the week in practice that made them think that was a good play. And obviously that's not the only important moment from the game, but it is the one I think right now based on some of what I'm already seeing with the online chatter that people are talking about the most. Jeff, I think the thing that is the most painful, by the way, this is Jeff Sintel. My name is Brandon Adams, if I forgot to say that a moment ago. I think the thing that's the most painful here is, and the thing that those, Alabama folks are going to look forward to rubbing in the faces of a lot of Georgia fans is, this game is almost a coin flip opposite of what last year's was, where it's an ineffective Jalen Hurts giving way to a Tagovailoa who comes in to be the savior. And this, night's game is an ineffective Tua Tagovailoa that gives way to a Jalen Hurts, and he'll now be written as the savior of this game. If you're a Georgia fan, I don't even know how you process this. You controlled most of the game. There were many points where it seemed like Georgia was, and I promise I'm going to let you talk in a minute, but there are moments in which it almost looked like Georgia was close to throwing the knockout blow, the knockout punch that would have put Alabama out of the game, and yet Alabama, as has been their way, just wouldn't die in this spot. There's a lot to process, Jeff. I mean, where are you on what we all just got a chance to see?
You good? You got it all out? We need a couch here, everybody, maybe. So I guess this is the way I'm betting most of you guys are feeling right now. And I guess the first place to start, the game's 28-14. Georgia has seen Tua Tagovailoa leave the game, and I'm sure everybody's thinking, this is the moment, this is the chance. You'll look at the final stats. You'll see Georgia throws the ball 39 times. They run the ball 39 times. Jake Fromm goes over 300 with 301. The ground game turns out 153 yards. But there are two things that just stick in your craw besides the 4th and 11, and it's the fact that Georgia, and this is what you were saying a minute ago, Brandon. You said, if I would have told you before the game that an ineffective starter will be replaced by a backup and he will lead his team to an improbable victory, Jalen Hurts was not your guy. Vegas did not have that guy. And, the narrative, the press room narratives, are Georgia has found a way to make another championship game legend out of another quarterback. That's Jalen Hurts now and Tua.
Trey Lockledge in our Facebook comment section says the decision to go for the peculiar play on 4th down was stupid. And, Jeff, I guess I've wrapped myself in knots here trying to find a reason why maybe it wasn't. I've heard from smart people that I respect on the sideline at the moment who said, hey, there's some other things to consider as of why you might have done something like that. But I guess, Jeff, in this case, simple is the best tact, and the simple evaluation is it was stupid. This was not a smart thing to do. And in a game where there are a lot of momentum-changing plays, a lot of big moments, this was among the biggest. And for Kirby Smart, I don't know that he's ever made a worse coaching decision, or the staff that he's put in place. I don't know that they've ever made a worse decision than the one that made on 4th down. Doesn't change the fact that Kirby Smart is still one of this sport's greatest young coaches, and I think he's on his way to a fabulous career here at the University of Georgia. This tonight was one that I know that he'll probably never want to relive again.
Well, I'm sure everybody gets the text messages. I'm sure the data plans are spiking with text messages across the state of Georgia, everywhere tonight. Some people of mine that I call friends that really root for Georgia really hard, they wonder if Georgia and Kirby Smart can ever beat Nick Saban with a call like that. I don't fall into that line, but if you want to line up that call and that play, first of all, let's be very balanced. We've talked about how it was a dumb call. In the postgame locker room, one of the things that Justin said and everybody else said is they've been practicing that ad nauseum, and we'll hear those comments a little bit later. But one of the things they said was, we worked on it all week. There's a guy, we snapped it too late. There was a guy uncovered. He got covered late. So that's the first flaw I see right there. If you've worked on it all week, why are you snapping the ball late? Number two, why in the world is Justin Fields in for the first time as a punt protector when he hasn't shown up there ever in the season?
You can't sneak Justin Fields on the field at that moment. He's wears number 1. It's the easiest number to find. He's among the most heralded players, on the Georgia sideline. You can't sneak him onto the field at that point.
So the things that bug me is that people could say that's an aggressive shot. Another thing I don't like about that play is you've got Jalen Hurts as a backup quarterback in there. Hasn't played a lot this year against an opponent with a coverage scheme and defenders like Georgia. Why don't you make him go 85 yards rather than 50 yards? And the second thing that bugs me about that play is Georgia had a 4th and 1 and a 4th and 2 earlier in the second half. Georgia punts it. I think those are the times to make that call and go for that play, not 4th and 11.
I think that's a good point by Jeff Sintel. It's a Northside Hospital post-game show. We're live on the field after Georgia's lost to Alabama. Jeff said we're going to hear from Justin Fields. We are going to do that. Before that, though, let me remind you, the Northside Hospital brings the program to you, and their team of sports medicine experts with 10 locations in the Atlanta area. There is one close to you. Find them online at sportsmedicine.northside.com. Once again, sportsmedicine.northside.com. Or give them a call at 1-855-NH-SPORT, 1-855-NH-SPORT. Obviously, tonight's a disappointing night, but Northside's been a great partner for us on this Northside Hospital postgame show all season long, and we appreciate their support of Dog Nation. All right, as Jeff promised, let's hear from Justin Fields. Couple things to set this up. He will talk about the thought process behind the play as it was, and at the end, we'll get into the future of Fields at the University of Georgia. I flat out ask him, can you guarantee that you'll be back at Georgia in 2019? I think you'll find Fields' answer to that pretty interesting. From the Georgia locker room a couple of moments ago, here on our Northside Hospital postgame show, here is one of Georgia's quarterbacks and one of the central figures in the fourth quarter of tonight's game, Justin Fields.
We didn't come here to tie. We didn't come here to go into overtime. We came here to win the game. So that was his call, and I'm 100% behind it.
This is another one of those games where you were used sporadically, you not getting a full drive coming in for a play. A lot of people have made assumptions how you might feel about that. How did you feel about the way that you were used this season?
I'm just happy I was able to help my team any way I could help, no matter if I'm on the field, off the field. I'm just glad to help.
Once again, there's assumptions about what your relationship with Jake Fromm might be like, or what your perspective is on, watching live from the bench. I know you were anticipating getting these questions. What is it really like?
I mean, most people try to kind of separate us and try to make us against each other, but we're actually friends, and he teaches me the offense. I ask him questions constantly. What would he do in this certain situation? So I just kind of like pick his brain because I know he's a very smart quarterback. He's definitely probably the smartest quarterback I've been around. So, I mean, I just like learning from him and kind of just picking his brain.
Last thing for you, can you guarantee you'll be back at Georgia next season?
This season's not over with, so, I mean, we still have one more game left. So we're really going to come back on Monday, just practice and just focus on the next game.
Justin, thanks for your time.
No problem.
So you hear from Justin Fields there, his thoughts on the fourth down play, and then his thoughts on his own future at Georgia. And obviously, we've always been aware that in this day and age, quarterbacks have things to think about. But, Jeff, what do you make of the fact that Fields somewhat tactfully sidesteps the guarantee of saying he's going to be back at Georgia? Again, most players in that locker room, if you ask them if they have eligibility left, only a few would even consider not being back at Georgia. The fact that Fields chooses to get political at that point in time, what do you make of that?
Well, I talked to him afterward. A bunch of reporters did. It was a horde around Justin. Obviously, it was a popular interview after the game in the open locker room. And he indicated to me that he loves Georgia. He sees things he has to work on to get better. And he feels challenged by what Jake Fromm did. And, the whole narrative, I know we'll all get into it, but 25 out of 39, 301, 3 touchdowns. Alabama was getting to Fromm. He didn't have a clean pocket at times. I don't know if you can ask Jake Fromm to play any better. Justin told me afterward that he thought it was Jake Fromm's best game he's ever seen him play at Georgia. I know that's a narrative for the postseason going forward, but, my feelings, I guess, are kind of normal on this. If Justin Fields feels like that he needs to leave Georgia, then he's basically leaving because he doesn't want to compete with Jake Fromm. He's leaving because he wants to go somewhere else. I personally think it would not be wise of a very intelligent young man to go transfer and sit out somewhere when he would have the ability to play at Georgia next year regardless. And then Jake Fromm, let's face it, if Jake Fromm plays next season like he did tonight, he's going to be an NFL draft pick.
Yeah, I think Jeff's right about that. In terms of this season-long competition that's going on and one that'll stretch in the offseason, obviously Fromm, even at a losing cost tonight, made a big statement about himself. He's one of the premier quarterbacks in the country. He had, I think, arguably his best game against the best defense he's ever faced. We'll hear from more Georgia players coming up in a couple of moments, including Richard LeCount, who will talk about, from a defensive standpoint, the difference in facing Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, what the challenge of the Georgia defense was when Hurts comes into this game. And LeCount will also give his thoughts on whether he thinks that Georgia is still one of the 4 best teams in the country, despite the fact that it lost tonight. I know that Kirby Smart made an emphatic argument for Georgia being in the college football playoff. We'll show you what Smart said a little later on in our program tonight. Let me get a few more comments before we get there. And y'all know, I mean, I don't even know what to say. I feel like we have said this before, and obviously this is a show to vent. I'll do some venting. I know that Jeff will share some of his thoughts as well. We'll leave the comment section for you guys open to do some of that kind of stuff too. It's not fun. It's not the show that we, at one point maybe thought we were going to be doing or certainly wanted to do, but, sometimes this is what the job is, and tonight that's the case. The beautiful backdrop here of Mercedes-Benz Stadium not giving us the conversation we hope to have tonight here on Northside Hospital postgame show. John Morgan in our Facebook comment section, Jeff, a moment ago said something that I do think is a very difficult point to argue against. That if you want to run the unorthodox play on 4th and 11, try to catch Alabama in a fake situation and hope to catch them napping, to put a guy that hasn't played a lot of football in at that point in time and doing that, that's what you don't like. If you think that Justin Fields is the best player to have on the field at that time, despite the fact that Jake Fromm has been, strong all night long, then just go for it and run a regular play. Or there's a case to be made, as you pointed out a moment ago. How about you trust your defense against Jalen Hurts, a quarterback that was so faulty a year ago they put him on the bench in this very stadium? How about you trust your defense for a couple of minutes? But to try to surprise and trick the Alabama defense, that's the same faulty thinking that got this team in trouble at LSU. Now, ultimately, faking a field goal at LSU will end up being a glorified exhibition. Doesn't matter a whole lot. But when you have a blunder like that in the SEC championship, it may have cost you a spot in the college football playoff.
Yeah, another thing, like people have already pointed out, I've gotten the messages, Georgia's normally a punt shield team, especially in a punt block situation. And then Georgia, with Fields back there, they lined up in more of a pro-style punt, punt, protect type look. And I just think right there, I'm sure the narrative that came out was Georgia's going to be aggressive. We want to take a shot to win. They want to put the game in. Justin hasn't done that any this year. He hasn't seen that look any this year. And the fact that they can't snap the ball fast tells me that play wasn't as razor sharp as it needed to be. I mean, there's so many points in this game where you sit there and you go, what's going on? Tua Tagovailoa didn't look healthy the whole game. I think he was 3 out of 9. With an interception for 35 yards in the first half. It didn't look like he was getting any power. He wasn't stepping forward with his throws. He wasn't driving the ball downfield. And I know everybody's going to look going forward, and they're going to say Georgia's in the Sugar Bowl. Do they make it in the 4? Or is it going to be hard to put Georgia in the 4, no matter the resume that they have out there? Just, it's one of those things, you don't mind me sharing this. We said this before we went on the air. And I want to ask the same question I asked this gentleman, all of you out there. Does this one right here feel worse? Does it hurt worse than the one in the national championship game? You had your answer to that.
Yeah, for me it does. And obviously you can make a case of the national championship game stakes are higher. An SEC championship game only qualifies you to maybe get to that spot. But to have the game feel like such a duplication of what happened before, as a fan, and y'all know that I bleed red and black. I have the entire time that I've done this program, and for decades before any of you ever knew who I was. This is it. This is the worst loss I've ever suffered as a fan. And obviously I'm not on the field. I'm not coaching. I'm not playing. The guys who, sweat and bled for this team feel it a lot worse than I do. I never pretend otherwise. But as someone who's watched every Georgia game closely that I can ever remember going back to the early 80s, I don't know that any game's ever hurt as bad as this one does.
So let's make sure we report a little bit and we we share information, and we act as gatekeepers of information and not just vent and bleed. One of the things that Kirby Smart said after his postgame was he was proud of his guys. Georgia's not going anywhere. The future at Georgia is really bright, and that's just a reason. A lot of the players, we talked to a lot of the freshmen. You'll see those stories on dognation.com. They're motivated. They're inspired to get better, to find a way to knock off this Alabama team. And let's face it, this is not rocket science. These two teams are going to be doing this same thing again here next December of 2019, and everyone is hoping that the results will be different next time.
All right, we're going to hear from more Georgia coaches and players throughout our program. As Jeff said, Kirby Smart made a pretty strong case for Georgia making the playoff. Why don't we let you see what Smart said about that after we hear from Richard LeCount? LeCount's obviously a terrific member of this Georgia defense. He's been one of this team's, vocal leaders. Obviously, one of the guys that's been in the mix of that Georgia secondary all season long. He's heartbroken tonight. You hate to even have to talk about a game like this. Obviously, he wants to just, put it behind him and move on. But he was good enough to spend some time with us. He shares his thoughts on the early momentum in the game, the changeover going to Jalen Hurts after the Tua Tagovailoa injury, and then a pretty strong case for why he thinks Georgia's one of the 4 best teams. It's our Northside Hospital postgame show. Take a look at Richard LeCount right now. Here's a part of our Northside Hospital postgame coverage with Richard LeCount. Richard, obviously in the first half, things were going for your team. In the second half, Alabama comes back, gets a little bit more momentum going. What were your thoughts as the momentum seemed to be changing there a little bit in the second half?
I mean, I just think that we stayed level-headed during the game. First half, second half, the momentum did change, but we just keeping the guys, in tune and tell them that it wasn't over. Keeping them grounded, to be able to finish the game.
You guys got to Tua Tagovailoa with a lot of pass rush in the early going of the game. Really seemed to rattle him a little bit. Was that a concerted part of your game plan coming in here, something you'd focused in on a lot of practice?
I mean, we always try to, rush the pass him and get him, uncomfortable in the pocket, whether we playing, no matter who we playing. And, the rush was amazing today, getting to the quarterback and doing what he had to do.
And the challenge when Hurts comes in at the end, what's different about defending him there as opposed to Tua earlier in the game?
I mean, we kind of contained Tua a lot, keeping him in the pocket and things like that. And we just a few miscues when coming in with Jalen, not keeping him in the pocket that, allowed him to scramble.
Your team, one of the 4 best teams, does it deserve to still be in the playoff?
We definitely are one of the best teams, in the nation. And, you've seen it out there today.
Back here live on the field at the stadium. It's our Northside Hospital postgame show. That's Jeff Sintel. I'm Brandon Adams. You just heard from Georgia safety Richard LeCount. Of course, we're all brought to you tonight by Northside Hospital, 10 locations in the Atlanta area. They're sports medicine experts. Can get you back in the game if you've been hurt or if you just want to make sure you don't get hurt. Northside will help you out with that. Check them out online at sportsmedicine.northside.com, sportsmedicine.northside.com. Or give them a call. I'll give you the number here, 1-855-NH-SPORT, 1-855-NH-SPORT. So I want to throw a couple things up on the screen here. Now, I won't be able to read these quotes to you, but I'm going to presume you'll read these yourself. Kirby Smart, emphatic about Georgia being in the college football playoff. We'll give you a chance to see that. Nick Saban doing a part, either a solid for his former assistant Kirby Smart, or maybe they're his legitimate feelings. But one way or another, both these coaches in tonight's game say that 2 of the best 4 teams in the country were playing in tonight's game. Do you think the politicking from Smart here, which I don't fault him for doing, I think he's got a pretty strong case to make about that. I guess in a weird way, I'm somewhat appreciative of Saban saying what he's saying. Is that going to matter with the committee come tomorrow, just afternoon?
Well, I think most people, it's the whole thing. People are going to be mad tomorrow, whether it's Oklahoma, Ohio State, or Georgia fans. Obviously, the system is kind of wrecked when Georgia can play the nation's #1 team who thought nobody could beat, perhaps easily one of Nick Saban's top 3 Alabama teams, and they can take them to the brink, and they can fall out of the playoffs from number 4, whereas Notre Dame doesn't play at all. And Clemson goes through the ACC bracket where the degree of difficulty is nothing like the SEC with 8 top 25 teams. If you're doing this the right way, I think if you're doing this as who are the best 4 teams in college football, you're not talking about Georgia falling out of the 4. You're talking about Georgia moving up to number 2 or 3 after this performance. Who knows whether the committee will have that type of insight?
Yeah, I think Jeff's right. I mean, let's not forget that Georgia comes into the weekend in the top 4. If a normal week like this happened where Georgia played Alabama this way, I don't know how much Georgia would have fallen in a normal weekend, but obviously this is not a normal weekend. This is the final weekend where the argument goes down for who's actually in the playoff. I think the problem here is, had Oklahoma played a different kind of football game today, there's a stronger case to be made for Georgia. You know, Oklahoma gets a safety in the fourth quarter of this game. So the narrative of you can't put Oklahoma in the college football playoff because they don't play any defense. Now, they still don't play any defense, but they did make a couple defensive plays late in the game to salt the thing away against Texas. Texas is a ranked team. Oklahoma avenges the only loss it had a year ago, or I should say earlier in the season. So I am 100% in the belief that Georgia is one of the 4 best teams in the country. I don't think the committee cares. I don't think the committee gives a rip about the actual 4 best teams, and nobody on ESPN will say that, but it's the truth. You know, they're going to look to, find a way to get another non-SEC team in the playoff, and credit to Oklahoma. They played well enough today to make a strong case for themselves, and honestly, I don't even know what the Big Ten title game score is. Don't really care. I don't think Ohio State's eligible for the playoff now that they were ranked behind Oklahoma last week and Oklahoma won today. I think Ohio State's been eliminated from playoff contention, even if they won 100-0.
You know, there's a lot of truth to what you said there, and there's a lot of things that should make folks think that should make things win. And we got a final there in the Ohio
It's not a final. It's an in progress score. Buckeyes do lead 17-7 if you care.
Against Northwestern, of all people. And, you know, the one thing that kept going through my mind when you were talking about Oklahoma playing defense and beating a ranked Texas team was that's the same school that went into overtime with Army, I believe. That's the same school that would get in over a Georgia team that has a loss to a top 10 LSU on the road. And then they have a loss in the SEC championship game to the best team in the country by far. And here's what's going to happen. I don't need a crystal ball to say this, but if Georgia is not in the bracket, if they're not in the final 4 teams, I think Alabama will beat everybody in that bracket by about 24 points.
Yeah, it's Jeff Sintel there. We'll obviously keep your comments going here on the Northside Hospital post-game show. We'll talk. John Thompson had something kind of interesting to say a little earlier, and then to get back to what's been kind of a hot topic, what happens on the fake punt on 4th and 11 midfield. Georgia doesn't get it. Alabama goes down to score. It turned out to be a game-winning touchdown. There had been some criticism, and John Thompson addressed this with his Facebook quote a moment ago. There had been some criticism of Fields even being in the game at all, given the fact that Fromm was as hot as he was. I thought that John's point here was that this is a scenario where the presence of Fields in the game would have kept the Alabama sideline guessing. And not only guessing during the game, but the thought of Fields in the game would have kept that team guessing throughout the week in practice. Now, strategically, it doesn't end up leading to anything for Georgia tonight. Fields' brief time on the field doesn't go anywhere. But I do think that wrinkle in terms of what you can get Alabama thinking about in its own practices, taking time away from preparing for something else, I don't think that's an insignificant point. And I guess, I don't know. I guess I don't really mind the sporadic appearances of Fields before the 4th down play, but I'm on the record as saying I don't like the 4th down play for sure.
Well, I just don't like. There was another series. It was another series in the 4th quarter where Georgia had to make something happen. I believe the score was tied at that point, and Fields comes in for 1st down, and I don't understand that at all. That's crunch time. That's the time when you desperately need Jake Fromm to keep doing the things he's doing, and there's a lost yardage on that play. It's not a great time, and then Fields jogs off, and Jake jogs back on, and he has to deal with a 2nd and 11 against that Alabama defense. He completes a ball to DeAndre Swift. They move the chains. They burn some clock, but not a very. You could just say overall, I think what Georgia showed there by putting Fields in the game at such opportune times is how much he's valued and how much they believe in what he can do. The results just weren't there tonight.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's our Northside Hospital post-game show. That's Jeff Sintel. We'll keep talking to you about everything that goes on tonight's game. Obviously, coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to get a chance to hear from Georgia wide receiver Mecole Hardman. And, You know, I think, Jeff, one of the painful things about a night like this for me as a fan is, you know, I want to celebrate the season that Mecole Hardman has. We'll hear from Georgia running backs later on, Elijah Holyfield and DeAndre Swift. I want to celebrate the season they had. I put this in the forum earlier today at forum.dognation.com. If DeAndre Swift is as healthy for a full season as he has been over the course of the last now 6 games, I think the Heisman Trophy conversation is potentially very different. And what's really a shame about this game tonight and the way that it goes down is that you right now, you know, can't really appreciate Hardman and the way that he really came into his own as a receiver this year, and probably the most dangerous punt return weapon in the entire SEC right now.
Yeah, you've got Mecole, who makes a lot of things happen, and I think everybody, you know, as journalists, as reporters in the media, this is a bitter loss. I think you and I were talking off the air during one of the breaks while you guys were seeing some video, and you kind of said you ranked the 2 Alabama losses as among the top 5 in Georgia history that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, you know, right now I don't have a number 2. Right now it's just this thing. I mean, and I know that may be, you know, the prisoner of the moment type situation, but listen, I've lived and died with Georgia football my entire life, and there's not a single loss Georgia's ever suffered that's hurt worse than this one does tonight.
And you know, I know a lot of people are feeling that way. I know a lot of people are bleeding. I'd love to, you know, this is a group therapy session where everybody's on the couch, and this is Dr. Adams here kind of leading the thing with his cell phone instead of a pen and paper. But to me, you sit there and you go, what's next? What are Georgia fans going to be thinking about next? And I think Georgia fans are going to be thinking about, one, is there some shot they get in there and get amongst the top 4? I think that's even lower odds than 2nd and 26. The next thing you got to start thinking about is, where's the bowl destination? Most likely looks like the Sugar Bowl. The next things you start thinking about is DeAndre Baker obviously going pro, Terry Godwin going pro. All those seniors are going pro. What about the juniors? Isaac Nauta, Mecole Hardman, all those guys, Elijah Holyfield. Those are storylines that will have to be covered in December.
And speaking of that, when it comes to Mecole Hardman, we had a chance to ask him about that. Has he given any consideration to the NFL? He'll talk about that and also what happened tonight. Here on our Northside Hospital post-game show, along with Jeff Sintel, I'm Brandon Adams. Hope you enjoy, or at least as much as possible can be enjoyed, what Mecole Hardman had to say a little earlier on. Take a look. We obviously know these are not questions you want to be talking about. This is not a conversation you want to have. But when you look back on what did just unfold, what are your immediate thoughts about the way this goes down a couple of minutes ago?
Man, we played a great game. You know, great call was called. You know, and we played our heart out there. We left everything out there. You know, and them guys played a great second half, and you know, we just can't hang our head about it. We just got to keep going and, you know, go from here.
We've talked to other guys before about when a momentum shifts in a game like that, and obviously the national championship game, and to a certain degree was very much the same way. As a player, do you feel that happening? Do you feel that momentum shift? And as a player, how do you try to respond to that?
I mean, in this game, man, it's gonna be momentum swing, especially with 2 teams like us and Alabama. Momentum gonna swing and swing. You know, you just gotta. It's about who the best that handle it. Who you know, who controls the momentum better, you know, and but they got momentum late in the game, and you know, and they hung in their favor.
Statistically speaking, this is one of the best offenses in the country that you've been a part of this season. Is there a sense of accomplishment in knowing that, you know, you guys had a great game plan tonight, and presumably anyone you play moving forward in the postseason, you guys got to have a chance to score a lot of points? I mean, what do you feel about where your offense is at this portion of the season?
I feel good. I think our offense is doing exactly what exactly what we're supposed to do. We putting points on the board. We execute on downs we should, and I mean, definitely any team we play, we're gonna put points on the board. You know, and just try to, you know, execute the best way we can.
You have a versatile skill set. You can return kicks. You've proven yourself to be a very good wide receiver. That's a pretty valuable commodity for the NFL. Is that something that you're going to think long and hard about at the end of this season, of maybe leaving after your junior year to go to the NFL?
I ain't putting no much thought in it, man. I mean, you know, just focus on the season, focus on us right now, and just try to finish, and that'll come at a later time.
Thanks for your time. So there's Mecole Hardman with obviously a lot to think about in the future. I do think when Mecole decides to become a pro football player, either after his senior season or maybe if he gives it a shot here after his junior season, I think there's a chance that he has a very long career in the NFL because of the things that he does well. I think for a lot of Georgia fans, they'd love to see another year of Hardman in a Georgia uniform. At the very least, they'll see some more football of him, at least presumably, in the 2018 season. So you touched on this a moment ago. Hardman is representative of a lot of players in this roster who have a lot to think about. And, Jeff, and I say this with all great respect to these players, they are going to be drafted at a range that makes that situation a little bit more complicated. If they're all DeAndre Baker, obviously they're all leaving. But a lot of these guys are going to have to lean on the draft grades they do get to really know if that's the right choice. And you certainly hope they get the best advice from outside sources.
So we've seen this a lot. If you would just follow the history of Georgia football, I think after Kirby Smart's first season, you saw guys like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel and Davin Bellamy and Lorenzo Carter return because of the bitter taste of the 2016 season. That worked out. They created a special 2017. Now flash forward to the next year. DeAndre Baker did not like the way that things ended against Alabama in the national championship. He made the decision he wanted to come back and right those wrongs of 2017, the 2018 national title game, and that worked out well for him. We just rolled off a lot of names. I'm sure one or two of those guys in that group will go pro. I'm sure one or two of those guys will come back, and they will say to themselves, that way I felt against that Alabama team, I wanted to take my college career, and I wanted to wipe that away from my memory blank.
Chad Buchanan in our Facebook comment section, to change the subject here briefly, says recruiting. You know what's kind of weird about tonight's game, Jeff? And you and I, we literally talk about this kind of stuff all the time, both on and off the air. This is the first bad thing that's happened in the Kirby Smart era where I don't immediately see recruiting as the necessary solution. I don't know how recruiting helps what happened tonight. Now, obviously, being a little deeper and a little better clearly helps. But this was a game that Georgia had in its grasp. This is the first time I've seen something on a field with Georgia that was not necessarily going to be solved by going out there and finding another five-star recruit.
Well, my reaction to that is I saw the way Alabama gassed Georgia is when they ran the ball, they ran it right between the A-gap and B-gap.
Now, that's true.
They ran it right at where the defensive tackles, those five-star defensive tackles need to be. Alabama has Isaiah Buggs. Alabama has Quinnen Williams. Georgia doesn't have those guys. So I think Georgia needs a little bit more stout guys in A-gap and B-gap. The other thing I want to say is pass rush. That's one thing that Georgia didn't get enough pass rush on Tua, even with him as one-legged as he was. And they didn't get enough pass rush on Jalen Hurts as well. I think that's the two areas to me where recruiting could help.
So you mentioned Isaiah Buggs. I thought Andrew Thomas handled him pretty well in a pass blocking situation tonight, but in a obviously when it comes to a run situation, there is a little bit of extra beef that Alabama has that Georgia doesn't have, and we knew that was going to be a slight advantage coming in.
And I'll say this: I will make sure I'm balanced here when I say Georgia needs more pass rush, but I also saw holding. And let's face it, guys, holding gets called. Holding happens on every snap in college football. It's just whether it gets caught and whether it's flagrant and whether it's obvious. A lot of times Georgia could not get home on the quarterback because Alabama was doing a great job of getting some jersey and not getting it called. One thing I want to read, folks, and we got the you want to know how your head coach feels after this loss. And someone asked them, Kirby Smart, this question. Kirby, to have this happen 2 years in a row to come up short at the very end, what do you feel? He says sick. We've got to play better in the fourth quarter. That's a big thing for us. We talked about it at halftime. We want to come out and be the more physical, dominant team and play the second half and win. We couldn't close the deal. I don't know what that is. We're going to figure it out, though. I can promise you that. We're a few plays away. There are a lot of plays in that game. Everybody's going to point to whether it's a field goal, whether it's a fake punt, or whether it's a breakdown on that third down contain or fourth down contain and they score, a fumble. It's so many things. It's inches. And we didn't get the inches tonight. We've got a damn good football team.
Yeah, that's good stuff from Kirby Smart. Andre Harris, though, on the subject of Kirby Smart in our Facebook comment section says, a game like this makes sure that Smart will remain in Nick Saban's shadow. And I think, unfortunately, Andre's right about that, what he says in our Facebook comment section about that very point, that Smart does not get out of Saban's shadow tonight. And if anything, this was an unusual storyline for Georgia because this becomes the first team to beat Kirby Smart in consecutive games since he's been Georgia coach. We made a big deal about the revenge tour last year for Georgia. Every opponent that beat Georgia in 2016, Georgia beat in 2017. And then the one team to beat Georgia in 2017, at least until the end, they got another win against Auburn right here in the SEC championship. Now an opponent's beaten Georgia 2 years in a row. The narrative that could be constructed last year of, oh, so close to a national championship, be motivated, come back and do it in 2018, more talented roster for sure in 2019, but knowing exactly how that narrative from a Georgia perspective is going to be constructed, as of right now, it's a little bit different to start writing that thing yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams along the way that would have been very great in football lore if not for that other big bad behemoth in the way. And let's face it, Georgia, this is a Dog Nation channel. This is a Dog Nation program. But if Alabama wasn't so stinking good and so stinking dominant, Georgia might be looking pretty good and pretty high on the hog about 2 consecutive national championship type seasons. But that's just Alabama in the way. And I've got one reporter's question I want to ask folks. I want to ask you guys out there, and I want to ask you as well. You might be the first one to answer it. For Georgia to get redemption this season, they're going to have to be voted into the Final Four. It is a very unlikely scenario. But if they are amongst those 4, they probably stay at 4. And how do you feel out there, Dog Nation, after these last 2 bitter, bitter games against Alabama? How do you feel about playing Alabama again in a month?
I think I can speak for myself and say I'd absolutely tape up, buckle up, and pray up and get ready to go out and do it again. Georgia showed tonight why they're not afraid of Alabama. Now it comes down to the issue of just actually getting that job done. We'll let some of you weigh in on that as well as a part of our Northside Hospital post-game show. Make sure you check out Northside Hospital and their team of sports medicine experts online at sportsmedicine.northside.com. That's sportsmedicine.northside.com. Or give them a call at 1-855-NH-SPORT. Once again, the phone number, 1-855-NH-SPORT. We're going to close out our program today, though, with some of your comments in a moment, and also hearing from both Georgia running backs. We'll talk to DeAndre Swift later on. Let me start, though, with Elijah Holyfield, because Holyfield also took some time to address with us the same subject that Mecole Hardman addressed there a moment ago. Now, Holyfield had a big part and a big resurgence for the Georgia running game over the course of the season. Was it now good enough that Holyfield, much like the decision that Hardman may face, will he consider the NFL? We did talk to Holyfield about the great work done by he and DeAndre Swift and these Georgia running backs over the course of the last 6 games and the potential of his future here on the Northside Hospital postgame show from moments ago in the Georgia locker room. Here we are with Elijah Holyfield. Take a look.
How much?
We're here with Georgia running back Elijah Holyfield, and we were talking to DeAndre a moment ago. You and him have been leaders for this team, both on the field and presumably off the field. Do you feel a need to step up and even become more of a leader after a game like this? Because obviously a lot of folks will be looking to you to see how you respond to this.
We just try to keep the young guys, heads in the right place, and realize it's up to we put it in somebody else's hands. So we just got to see what happens, and from there go play ball.
Talk about heads being in the right place. Obviously, you've got a lot to think about, and maybe you haven't had time to do that. Have you given some consideration to the fact that you might give the NFL a try after this season?
No, I haven't given that much thought yet.
Where do you think that your team goes from here? There's obviously a case to be made that Georgia could be considered one of the 4 best teams, and maybe your coach even on TV tonight might make a case for Georgia being in the college football playoff. Is that an argument that you feel like making, that even after a close loss tonight against the number 1 team, that maybe you guys should get another shot in the playoff?
I feel like we're one of the top 4 teams in the nation, so we'll see if the community thinks the same.
And then last thing for you, last year, and you've talked about what you've learned from Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, and as this team got rolling this year, you and DeAndre looked a lot like that tandem from a year ago. Is there a personal sense of pride that you guys were able to take that baton and maintain that standard for Georgia? People call it RBU, and obviously leaning on the running game. Is there a personal sense of pride for you in being able to maintain that?
Not so much personal, we just want to help our team win in any way possible, and we were able to.
From Mecole Hardman.
All right, so that's Elijah Holyfield there. You had a chance to hear from him, and we were talking a moment ago, had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. We're talking about a great season that Holyfield puts together. At a certain point in time, I know that Georgia fans will really reflect on the great appreciation they have for him, and obviously he's got a big decision to make about what he's got coming up.
Yeah, he's a guy that you look at the way he ran the ball today against Alabama. Everybody will sit there and say, I think Elijah goes over 930 yards this year. DeAndre Swift had another. He led the Bulldogs in rushing. One guy had about 75 yards. One guy had about 60 yards. You saw a little bit of Jake Fromm in the run game. Georgia averaged right at 4 yards a carry against mighty Alabama. And, sooner or later, you got to look at it. We just spoke about all these Georgia Bulldogs that might go pro. There's another host of Alabama Crimson Tide guys that are going to look at going pro as well. Quinnen Williams among them. And you saw Georgia went the entire game with Trey Hill at the right guard position. I thought he played pretty well after he gave up that first initial sack when Quinnen Williams got to him. You start looking up and down this Georgia roster, and you start examining this game. And you know what? I wish you guys are going to read these stories on Dog Nation the next week or so. But you just saw from the boys an overwhelming sense of hope and optimism. Guys like Channing Tindall, guys like Otis Reese, guys like Tyson Campbell, they're going to be better for this. And they don't want any Georgia team to feel the way those seniors did right now.
Michael Rivera, Josh Thompson, both talking about news that we haven't addressed here on this show. It's been addressed around Dog Nation. I wrote about this at the forum earlier today at forum.dognation.com. Potential that Mel Tucker may have coached his last game. If Georgia makes the playoff, my assumption is Tucker would stick around for that. I don't know why he would stick around for the Sugar Bowl necessarily, but regardless of what his immediate future is at Georgia, his long-term future may be at Colorado instead of Georgia. Any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, so Tucker's been great. Tucker's a guy that I don't think will hurt Georgia in recruiting as much. You've noticed that Kirby has came in on some of Tucker's key recruits. He's a great play caller. He's a great defensive coordinator. He's got that NFL experience, that NFL mind. He's a great teacher. But Kirby Smart, as well as he found replacements. He found a replacement for James Coley at wide receivers coach. He found a replacement for Kevin Shearer. He found a replacement with Dan Lanning. I'm sure he's got a short list of really good young defensive back coaching minds that will help out Georgia there going forward.
Let's take a moment to go back into the Georgia locker room from a couple of minutes ago here on our Northside Hospital postgame show live from the field. After Georgia's SEC championship game lost to Alabama, we talked to DeAndre Swift, and Swift tonight did so many amazing things for Georgia. And really, after the loss to LSU, the story of this Georgia season became, in part, how Fromm matured as a quarterback and how DeAndre Swift became healthier and one of the premier players in all of college football. Swift put that on the line again tonight against Alabama and came up big over and over and over. He was broken and dejected, but he was good enough to spend some time with us as well. Here we are in the Georgia locker room with DeAndre Swift on our Northside Hospital postgame show.
Obviously, there's always a lot of talk about leadership around the program. After a game like this, do you find that the leadership, vocal, leading by example, that becomes more important after was obviously a disappointing conclusion to this game?
I mean, most definitely. I mean, young people look up to the old people, so, I mean, if they down, hanging their heads, saying the wrong things in the locker room, it's going to really contribute to the younger guys. So we got to do a good job of keeping our heads up and just keeping a positive energy in the locker room.
You obviously seem to get much healthier over the course of the season. What was that process like for you physically in terms of you seem to be just more comfortable, healthier? I mean, what was that process like?
Real hard process. I mean, I worked real hard outside of football to make sure my body is right so I could put my best effort forward to put my team in the best position to win. But it took a lot of time, getting up early, going to treatment, coming to treatment at the class, stuff like that. But I got to do what I got to do.
I feel like you guys maybe deserve another shot at these guys.
Should we try to tie like that?
So DeAndre Swift there, a part of a Georgia offense that was all over the place, dominant in the first half, not as much in the second half. Shannon Baker questioned some of the play calling in the second half. Jeff, did you see a play calling change from this Georgia offense in the second half? Were they doing things differently? I mean, what do you make of the way that momentum really quickly turns to the other side in this game? It's, how do you process all that?
Well, I think you look at it, and this is what I said earlier in the show, is like it seemed like Georgia, once they got the big lead, they maybe, I'm not going to say took their foot all the way off the gas, but they didn't want to go out and win. Like, they had a couple of chances. The 4th and 1 still sticks in my brain. the 4th and 2 still sticks in my brain. Those would have given Alabama the same short fields that a 4th and 11 did right there. I thought the first half, the way they mixed in Jeremiah Holloman and Isaac Nauta, where he hit his checkdowns to the backs, I thought Georgia had a very, very, very impressive play script. The way they moved the ball, the way everything happened. I think Fromm hit 7 different receivers in the first half. It was just brilliant Georgia football, the way they played. And you talk about, I know Georgia fans will sit there and go, okay, Hot Rod, what if he makes that field goal? It's a totally different game. Got to remember, that's one of the best kickers in the country. He misses it. I can also, on the other hand, point out several plays. Even Kirby Smart pointed them out in his press conference where Alabama guys drop balls that really would have given them big momentum. And I still come back to those 2 early plays in the first half. One in the first half, one in the second half, where Georgia gets red zone picks of Tua Tagovailoa. I don't think Georgia wins the SEC championship, but I think Alabama and Tua might have lost the Heisman tonight.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I guess let me get ready to wrap up with some final thoughts of my own here. You know, I have been a big believer in the progress that Georgia has made since Kirby Smart first took this job in 2016. We all remember how disappointing the 2016 season was. 2017 was a dream come true to be in the college football playoff, the Rose Bowl, back in the national championship game. That's a disappointing end. And, you know, I think that to a certain extent, shaking off a bad loss like that in a season that you didn't necessarily expect to be there was maybe a little easier to do. And now to come back again the same year, the same stadium against the same opponent and have a loss that feels the same way, I think for a lot of Georgia fans, this one's going to be a little more difficult to shake off. And I know that for the people who feel that way, the words I'm about to say are going to ring a little bit hollow, and I apologize for that. Maybe you can hear them now and truly listen and believe them later on. I don't think what happened tonight changes the path that Georgia's on. I think that Georgia may be the favorite in the SEC in 2019, even with whatever Alabama brings back. Georgia can beat Alabama, just didn't tonight and didn't last year. But my overall faith in Kirby's ability to lead this program is as strong as it ever was. And my confidence in the program that Georgia is right now is really high, too. Georgia is one of the 4 best teams. And politics may keep them out of the college football playoff, and there's very little that any of us can do about that. But if Georgia's playing Ohio State or Oklahoma or Notre Dame tonight, I have a pretty good suspicion the outcome of this game would have been very different, and there wouldn't have been any weird moment on 4th down in the 4th quarter because Georgia would have been up 17 points maybe. So that's not the kind of thing that's easy to believe right now, and you probably just wish I'd shut up and stop talking. And if you feel that way, I guess I kind of understand. But what I'm saying is going to be true 2 days from now when you wake up and the pain of this game doesn't quite feel as intense anymore. It's still going to be true that Georgia's on its way to doing something good. We just got to live through the pain of this right now.
I think people think about, I know people won't think about this. They probably won't think about this until next Tuesday. You know, one of the things in the Mark Richt era was people said they want Georgia to be relevant. They want Georgia to keep knocking on the door. Richt never broke down the door. Any other part in your lifetime except these last 2 seasons, if I told you Georgia would be this close to being the national champion and this close to winning it all and beating the very best team in the country, are you going to be disappointed by that?
Listen, I mean, obviously when you put it in a certain perspective, it's pretty clear to see that Georgia fans are enjoying a brand of football they haven't seen, you know, since the early 80s. But you know how it is. You know, the more you get onto a big stage, the more the losses hurt when you suffer them.
Yeah, but Kirby Smart and this team has given this fan base and this program a lot of memories. There's a lot of heartbreak now, but they've given them this. If you look through the last 15 to 20 years of Georgia football, I think these past 2 seasons are as good as any other season Georgia has, except for the 2002 season, maybe the 2012 season. You have to remember, Georgia beat a 1-loss Alabama team last year. Georgia lost to a 1-loss Alabama team last year. And now listen, folks, Alabama's going to run the table, especially if the Bulldogs are not in the playoff. And they're going to go down and they're going to say this might have been the greatest Alabama team of all time. And that's the one thing maybe historians will look at as the only team that stood a chance this year against perhaps Nick Saban's finest Alabama team were your 2018 Georgia Bulldogs.
All right, so let me I guess get ready to sort of wrap things up here. First of all, huge thanks to everyone on the scene here who's made all this possible for us. Connor Riley here on the field with us in downtown Atlanta. Michael Carville back in our Atlanta studio. Entire host of people kind of running around and helping us also as well with that. BJ Sweeney, who set up our Road to Atlanta tailgate this morning. The people behind the scenes that in some cases you don't get to meet, you don't get to see. You wouldn't believe the effort they put into making sure that we're able to provide the kind of UGA coverage that we want to provide. I also want to say a thank you to, in the event a Georgia coach or a Georgia player would happen to check out a video like this, from someone who got a chance to travel around, watch a lot of good football this season. I'm really appreciative of the level with which Georgia plays. And, listen, being in this stadium and losing a game like this really hurts. But, and you kind of alluded to this a moment ago, not being allowed and invited into the building because you don't qualify to play in the SEC championship, that should probably hurt more. And so, once again, there's still more football to come. But once again, from me, Jeff, a huge thank you to the Georgia coaches and players for providing just hours and hours of entertainment for me and many of the people who are watching right now. I'm incredibly appreciative of that.
Yeah, maybe this is the dad in me. Maybe this is the guy that's over 40. But I know there are a lot of fan bases in college football that would love to swap these last 2 years with what Georgia has experienced. I'm sure you have neighbors that will give everyone grief about the fact that you root for the Georgia Bulldogs with all your heart and soul, and that really this is an absolute gut punch of a loss. But think about all those years where Georgia was looking at Shreveport, the Citrus Bowl. They had 3 and 4 loss seasons. These are the best. This Georgia program is a breath away from being called the best college football team in the land, and they've done it 2 years in a row. And I don't know how many Georgia fans can say that after a season unless you go all the way back to 1982, 1983.
All that said, trying to fake a punt on 4th down at the middle of the field was an unfathomable blunder, but we'll deal with that throughout the week. Big thanks to all of you here as well. I know our post-game reaction, we don't always say exactly what you wish we would say. We appreciate you sharing the conversation with us. And a huge thanks to Northside Hospital for being a part of our Northside Hospital post-game coverage all season long as well. Check them out online at sportsmedicine.northside.com or give them a call at 1-855-NH-SPORT. All right, so here is what's to come from Dog Nation. You'll obviously get a chance to read a lot about tonight's game and what Kirby Smart had to say, what the Georgia coach players had to say. What's next for Georgia in terms of its postseason destination. Dog Nation's going to be all over that. Jeff, when the new week begins, we are getting very close to the beginning of the early signing period. I know you've got a lot to pay close attention to there. This head-to-head battle that Georgia waged on the field tonight against Alabama, they're about to do some more of that in recruiting too, aren't they?
Yeah, you've got a guy like Clay Webb. You've got a guy like Nakobe Dean. You've got guys like Nolan Smith. You've got guys like Tyreek Stevenson, Noah Kane, Khair Elam. A lot of those big targets are left. And if you saw anything about this football game and you thought, yeah, Georgia could use a little bit more pass rush. Georgia could use a little bit more options up front. Georgia could use maybe another 4th or 5th or 3rd or 4th really good cornerback. This is the nature of football now. DeAndre Baker's going on in the NFL, so that means Eric Stokes is your number 1 corner. It means Tyson Campbell is your number 2. Who's your number 3 corner? Is that going to be a guy like Tyreek Stevenson? Is that going to be a guy like Khair Elam? Is that going to be a guy like Devod Wilson? Georgia's going to have to find those guys because late in that game, you want somebody extremely talented to be covering Jerry Jeudy and Jalen Waddle in the corner of the end zone.
And then I'll be back with you Monday morning for Dog Nation Daily. We'll look forward to talking about everything. I mean, we'll have to deal with this. That's not going to be necessarily fun, but I promise you that we'll all come together and figure out a way to feel better about this at a certain point in time. Dog Nation Daily's there for you every day. It's not going away or anywhere. Not going anywhere at all, despite the fact that Georgia lost this game tonight. So there are happier and better days to come for Georgia. Not easy to think about that tonight, but at a certain point in time, that's going to be true. We appreciate you being a part of our Northside Hospital post-game show. We wish we had better news. Georgia does lose to Alabama. Thanks so much for being with us, and we will talk about happier subjects in the very near future. Y'all have a great night, everybody.